Welcome to Unmasking the Shield. Hi, I'm your host, Bob, and in this podcast, we bring to you candid discussions about the lives of first responders. We reveal or unmask the men and women who serve in law enforcement, fire rescue, and emergency medical services on the front lines in your communities. A first-hand account of their stories, career advice, and what struggles they face or have faced on the job or post-retirement. We have open and honest discussions covering a variety of topics regarding the lives of first responders. Topics such as rookie years, career advice, managing stress, inspirations, violence in the workplace, and pitfalls of the job. We hope to humanize the people who respond when others are in need and lives are on the line. Many times you see first responders out in your community or in your city. You may see the police officer at the convenience store buying beverages for their cooler in their patrol vehicle, or the firefighters at the grocery store shopping for their meals for their shift, or maybe the EMT and paramedic sitting having a meal at a diner. But what you don't realize is that the police officers were stocking their cooler because they gave out all their beverages for the day to a homeless person sitting on a bus stop bench. Or the firefighters preparing their first meal on shift since losing a fellow brother or sister firefighter to cancer. Or the EMT and paramedic sitting having a meal, but only after they just had to console a mother and a father of the death of their toddler that they had tried to revive from a drowning death. This is the side people don't realize, the human and compassionate side of those who put on the shield. They do everyday acts, not only serving the community, but actually being a part of it and caring for the people in it. Hopefully this podcast will shed some light on those who serve or have served in public safety. This is Unmasking the Shield, Episode 1. In this episode, I'll cover the reason for the podcast, a brief background of myself, and some of the things that I went through. First, the reason for the podcast. To honor those who have served and selflessly gave or lost their life as a first responder, and those who will continue to put their lives on the line for complete strangers, never knowing what the day may bring. 9/11 is coming up on its 19th anniversary. And I can't help but feeling that there has been a loss of respect and admiration for those who risk their lives every day. I know other professions have their risks, and unfortunately, we know people that pass away. But there is a complete different feeling and understanding when you attend the funeral of a firefighter, police officer, or a medic. The hurt is palpable and indescribable, often not understood to outsiders. So this podcast was created to highlight your community's forgotten heroes. This first podcast is dedicated to my friend Jay, who served as a paramedic and was a one-of-a-kind person who passed away in November 2017. He was a kind, caring person, but he also had his own struggles. Rest in peace, J-Train. Okay, a little bit about me. I worked 15 years for a county EMS service, an ALS provider system in Southwest Florida. I worked 13 years as an EMT and 2 years as a paramedic. Unfortunately, my career was cut short by an on-the-job arm injury when moving a patient. But I'll start at the beginning. I worked 8 years as an EMT before getting my paramedic certification and promoting up. I wanted to be certain I was confident and the best EMT I could be before taking on a new role and more responsibilities. Promoting to paramedic was great because it gave me more control on how my patients were treated and how I could care for them. Plus, I could get rich from the massive pay raise. Just kidding. Wasn't much of a pay increase, so anyone who does it, I think it's truly about patient care and doing what's best for the patient. I think it was approximately a year or year and a half when I started encountering symptoms of PTSD after I promoted up. Something I didn't fully recognize or understand, but I realized I was struggling. I was having difficulty sleeping, having nightmares, night sweats, and apparently being irritable. I was very ashamed and felt broken. I felt it hard to confide in anyone because I didn't know anyone I worked with that was experiencing the same things. It was never talked about. I sought help at first with a psychiatrist, but all they want to do is pump you full of meds and make you feel zombie-like. I was still struggling, and it was affecting my family life and my work life. Being an irritable asshole definitely doesn't win you much love. But luckily I found a psychologist who I connected with and felt he understood better. But I also knew in order to get better, I needed to take further steps. I felt it would be best if I demoted myself back to EMT so I could focus on getting myself better. Very hard choice. I had to put aside my ego and whatever pride that I had and just do it for the better good of myself and my family. After demoting, I changed my shift by bidding from a 24-hour shift to a 12-hour day shift. It was definitely a step in the right direction and not having to run calls all night and being in your own bed every night. My new shift was good and I had a great permanent partner. I felt I was feeling a bit better physically, but emotionally I was still having nightmares, anxiety, and night sweats. I only confided in a few people because I was so embarrassed. It wasn't until one day when I was leaving my psychologist's office that I ran into a firefighter that I knew and worked with. He was waiting his turn to go in. This was someone I knew, I respected, and we had a quick conversation and wished each other well. But it was at that moment that I no longer felt alone. I didn't feel like a reject. I wasn't happy seeing someone I knew going through whatever struggles they were, but it also meant I wasn't the only one. It was kind of a sense knowing that I'm not some weak human or I'm not capable of dealing with what we encounter. That we're all humans, go through different things, deal with them differently. And slowly first responders started speaking up about what they were going through. So don't be afraid to get help. You're definitely not alone. So while working toward the end of my first year of my 12-hour shift is when things completely changed my life. One shift while moving a patient from the stretcher to the hospital bed, I tore my bicep tendon pulling him across. I immediately heard and felt a tear in my arm. It was absolutely gross. The pain was immediate and it felt like a blowtorch was melting my arm. Absolute intense burning, pain, and throbbing. Luckily, I was already in the hospital, and the doctors, nurses, and staff at Lee Memorial Hospital were fantastic in the way they cared for me. I can't thank them enough. Thank you all. 3 months after the injuries when I finally had corrective surgery. It was at an outpatient surgery center, and I remember thinking I couldn't wait to have a Baconator for lunch. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I woke up being wheeled through the emergency room doors at Gulf Coast Hospital, being pushed on an EMS stretcher, intubated still, confused, not knowing what was going on. I remember someone explained that I suffered a cardiac arrest during surgery, and I was even more confused. I see my coworkers Jonathan and Amy pushing me into an ER room. By the way, they were absolutely the best patient advocates that I could have asked for, and they treated me like royalty. Or at least so I'm told, since I was sedated when they arrived at the surgery center. They were true angels on earth. I can't thank them enough for what they did for me that day. In the ER room, I saw two more familiar faces. Another co-worker, a medic who works part-time in the hospital, and a lieutenant firefighter who works as an RN in the hospital. I felt a sense of relief that I knew I was in good hands and they were going to take good care of me, even though I was still really confused. I was in shock and I couldn't understand what happened or why. I'm so blessed that they took great care of me that day and they did their best to comfort me. More angels on earth, definitely. Thank you, Dominique and Khalid. I was lucky that day to have both of you there. The thing that bothers me the most is I don't know what caused my cardiac arrest. Everything checked out okay with my cardiologist, so the uncertainty is haunting. After months of rehabilitation, my arm didn't get much better and I was left with a permanent deficit in my arm, along with PTSD. So unfortunately, my employment was terminated. I was no longer able to do my duties as an EMT, and that was the end of my career. Not something I ever anticipated. I don't think anyone does. We all have the goal of making a full career and getting a full pension, but it wasn't meant to be, obviously. And I had to believe that everything happens for a reason. But it's still hard when you think you're losing your only identity, in addition to losing part of yourself too, physically and mentally. But in the end, over time, I realized I've been blessed to have this awakening to appreciate life, be grateful for everything I have. Something that I may have taken for granted earlier. My sons still have their dad, 5.5 years later. I'm pretty lucky. To all the other first responders out there, don't be afraid to get help. You're not alone, I promise. We all have our struggles and cope in different ways, and sometimes even put on a mask to hide our feelings or pain. There's no shame in getting help. Do it for you, do it for your loved ones, and do it for your future. So, in conclusion, these are real people with real struggles, real emotions, everyday heroes in your community. Not just a uniform or an emergency vehicle responding lights and sirens. They are family, friends, and loved ones. I hope this small personal perspective provides a better understanding of how our lives are impacted as first responders. Thank you again for listening. It has been a pleasure in presenting the first episode of Unmasking the Shield. As always, take care of yourself and each other.